Hi there. If you clicked on this video and you're thinking to yourself, I'm pretty sure I've seen this already but with less production design, you're not wrong. Back in 2023, before the end of all things, I assembled together the complete Alien timeline in anticipation for Alien Romulus and Alien Earth. Both of those have now been released along with Predator Badlands and have caused a significant amount of things to change within the timeline of the Alien universe as a whole. And not just the fact that Ray Romano is officially part of Alien canon now. We'll get to it. Basically, I'm going to be going through and updating the timeline with the events of the Maginot Crash on Earth, Boy Cavalier's failed child robot project, the Plate of the Renaissance, and trying to make sense of a few things that have shifted or completely decimated specific points within the universe's history. We'll also be trying to place Predator Badlands on the timeline and see if it fits into the canon or not. Where my deckheads at? Throwing this out there now, we're not going to be talking about Predator Killer of Killers. It does have a few things in it that add more to the Predator lore, but this isn't a Predator timeline. And if you're wondering if I'll be talking about Alien Isolation this time around, the answer is yes. I have read all of your angry comments from the previous video and I am here to make amends. Even though the events of that game don't actually have any impact on any of the cinematic timeline. But I digress. With all that said, onto the timeline. Now, cut to me from 2 years ago when I didn't look so haggard. A lot of important things happened in 1979. The Seattle Supersonics won their first and only NBA championship, the despotic Ugandan president Idi Amin was deposed, Fleetwood Mac released their second horniest album of all time, Tusk, and the science fiction horror thriller Alien landed in theaters on May 25th.
Alien, coming this summer to a theater near you.
The little movie that would go on to become a surprise box office success and would spawn a cinematic universe featuring 7 canonical films, a few crossovers, more than 24 video games, a library's worth of comics and novels, odd toy lines,
Drake, Ripley, 8-Bone,
one weird theme park ride that wasn't directed by James Cameron,
What happened to A-Squad, soldier?
and some of the most iconic moments in cinematic history. It's a franchise with so many different creative minds behind all of its films that it's evolved into one of the most varied universes visually, emotionally, and allegorically. The horrors of space, the horrors of sexual violence, the horrors of capitalism, the horrors of working with Hollywood studios, and of course the harrowing silence of God that is so loud you make 2 whole movies about it. And outside all of that, they're movies about groups of boneheads and milk robots sticking their faces into space eggs and getting picked off by the most terrifying movie monster ever, which is fun for everybody. With all those movies, books, video games, you're probably wondering how massive the timeline of the Alien universe is. Just gonna assume you are since you clicked on this video, or you left autoplay on and this was next. Either way, thank you. We're gonna break down the expansive timeline that stretches across the 6 main films and fill in some spots with help from some of the comics, novels, shorts, and special features. We'll also be touching on some of the non-canonical films and media that aren't officially a part of the timeline, but it would feel wrong not to include them in this video.
A f***ing alien.
And we'll dip a bit into the history behind some of the productions, the themes of the films, and how both possibly play into the overall lore of the franchise. Our sources for this video are the films themselves: Alien, Aliens, Alien Cubed, Alien Resurrection, Alien Romulus, Prometheus, and Covenant, the special features, deleted scenes, and commentaries found across multiple versions of DVDs, the quadrilogy, of course, specific comic book arcs, the Xenopedia Wiki, and the 2014 book, The Weyland-Yutani Report by author S.D. Perry. To keep this video as streamlined as possible, we're focusing on the timeline events that correspond the most with the films and the main characters: Ellen Ripley, Elizabeth Shaw, David, and Weyland-Yutani, the ever-present evil company throughout the films.
I work for the company, but don't let that fool you. I'm really an okay guy.
Like I said a minute ago, there's a lot of Alien novels out there, and they're all like 300 plus pages long, and I'm being very upfront with all of you and saying that I did not read any of them. Little addendum to that, I've actually read a few since the last video, and they still don't have any effect on this timeline. Aliens Phalanx is a hoot and a holler though, so give that a read. Thankfully, the internet can be helpful sometimes, especially with cliff notes, so certain books and dates that connect to the events and characters in the films will be included. Books like Out of the Shadows and River of Pain will be touched on in some way, but books like Aliens Criminal Enterprise or Aliens DNA War won't make the cut. If you're a scholar of the Alien novels, please feel free to educate me in the comments on whatever I may have missed. Also, we won't be mentioning the Alien Anthology shorts that were released in 2018. They're cool and there's some fun ideas in some of them, but they have no connection to this timeline whatsoever. It's gonna be a long one, so pour yourself a drink, strap up your Reeboks, and by the end of this video, maybe we'll figure out whatever the hell this is. Neat. The first mark on our timeline is one we can't put a hard date on or even tell you which planet it actually occurred on. The opening of the 2012 film Prometheus shows a tall, pale, and completely smooth alien being standing alone on a mysterious world atop a waterfall that looks a lot like the Dettifoss in Iceland, but the time and planet are never confirmed. I'm gonna go ahead and call these aliens the engineers right now, even though we know that they don't get that designation until Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway of the Prometheus crew give it to them way later in the timeline, which we'll get to.
We call them engineers.
And I know they have different names and titles from different media like the Oceans, the Malakak, and Space Jockeys, but we're gonna go with engineers. The engineer downs some evil looking chia seeds and is quickly eaten from the inside by an aggressive black goo, which we're not really going to dig into. The pathogen, also known as this, has its own mythology and science and confusing properties that we don't have the time to really get into the minutia of. I'm sure someone has a video somewhere on YouTube that breaks down the whole xenomorph life cycle if you want it. The engineer melts into the water below, spreading the bizarre DNA he just ingested across the planet, like passing out in a hot tub while you're drinking a daiquiri. We gotta mention the alternate opening of this movie where there's actually an audience of engineers viewing that one poor bastard who slams back the goop. The theatrical version we got feels more like a conscious decision by this being to seed this world with his DNA, whereas the alternate opening feels more sacrificial or even more like a punishment, but we'll touch on that a bit later. Next, we're jumping all the way to the Bronze Age on the Isle of Skye in Scotland, 35,000 years before Elizabeth Shaw discovers some cave paintings.
Did you date it?
35,000 years, maybe older.
This is around the time in human history where the earliest evidence of humanoids living in Ireland first sprung up, and approximately 1,000 or so years before the last glacial maximum. During this really unpleasant time to be alive, an unknown number of engineers visited prehistoric peoples and imparted either wisdom or warning about those big glowy things in the night sky. Things are quiet for a bit until around 90 CE, when the engineers made themselves a little bunker on the moon that's designated LV-223. There they started to initiate a plan to wipe out humanity for reasons that we will get to later. The team of bald lurches screwed up and lost control of the deadly syrup, which wiped out most of the engineers on LV-223, except for a few who locked themselves away in their spaceship and slipped into their sleep sarcophagi. And that's where we're leaving the engineers for a good long while. This is the part of the timeline that doesn't technically fit into the full Alien timeline, mostly due to specific films being owned by different studios at the time of production. But it would feel wrong to not mention the tangentially related movies and events that interact with the Alien franchise.
Not again!
Sorry to the Batman/Aliens comic, you did not make the cut. The first stop in this section is in the film Alien vs. Predator, thousands of years ago, with no real date to go off of, where ancient civilizations were visited and ruled over by the Yautja. Yautja. Unique New York. The Yautja are an alien species from the planet Yautja Prime, and are more commonly known as predators.
Well, we took a vote. Predators cooler, right?
Yeah. The whole ancient aliens angle with predators making sacrificial temples full of xenomorphs is kinda silly, so we're not really gonna spend a lot of time on it. We spring ahead to the Great Plains all the way in 1719, where we meet Naru, her brother, and a whole mess of French fur trappers who have the terrible luck of crossing paths with this big guy. The feral predator is eventually outsmarted by Naru, who returns to her people carrying her trophy and a flintlock pistol she was given by a trapper, which is inscribed Raphael Andolini, 1715. This retcons a very esoteric bit of Predator history, which we'll get to in just a second. The fate of Naru and the Comanche is left slightly ambiguous to anyone who hasn't read a history book, but foreign invaders rarely bring peace. Next, we get a small glimpse at an encounter between a predator and a xenomorph at a whaling station in Antarctica in 1901, and then we jump 86 years to when two future American governors and their band of mercenaries are sent to an unspecified Central American country to rescue a head of state, but it turns out to be a shadow operation run by the CIA, which is very unlike them. Dutch, Billy, Mac, Dylan, Shane Black, and the rest of the fellas cross paths with a predator that landed in the jungle just before they got there and has been having a blast just skinning Green Berets. Other than being the original Predator film, it doesn't connect too much to the timeline, aside from giving us a bridge to Predator 2 and a buttload of great quotes.
Yeah! Stick around.
You're bleeding, man.
I ain't got time to bleed.
In 1997, we then jump from the actual jungle to the concrete jungle, Los Angeles. It's more like 6 or 7 concrete jungles that are 20 minutes away from each other. LAPD Lieutenant Mike Harrigan is in the middle of a turf war between feuding drug cartels during an intense heat wave, and that's on top of everyone already having Con Air fever at the movies that summer. Good summer for movies, 1997. Great. To make things worse, a predator gets in the mix, wreaks some havoc, kills some drug lords, and cuts Gary Busey in half. What's he holding on to? Show it again. What's he holding on to? There's no top half. The character that Gary Busey is playing was originally supposed to be Arnold Schwarzenegger's Dutch, but he declined. Long story short, Harrigan finds himself aboard a Predator spaceship complete with a trophy case of different skulls, one of them clearly in the shape of a xenomorph skull, which is the first crossover nod between the two franchises on screen. I know about the comic, we're not talking about that. Harrigan is rewarded for his victory with the same flintlock pistol that Naru got in 1719, which retcons the lore of that pistol altogether. Raphael Andolini was originally a character that appeared only once in the 1996 Dark Horse comic short story, Predator 1718. In the comic, Andolini is an Italian pirate whose crew turns on him when he decides to return a lost treasure to the Catholic Church. Don't do that. His rightfully mutinous crew is defeated by Andolini and the Predator named Greyback, who we see at the end of Predator 2. Andolini would die during this combat, but he gives the Big Ugly a flintlock pistol as a thank you back in 1718. From the year 1997, we skip all the way to the year 2004 and the Paul W.S. Anderson movie, Alien vs. Predator. Now, despite all the things in Alien vs. Predator that makes it feel tied to the Alien franchise, it doesn't actually hold any canonical weight. The motivation behind AVP originally came about in the early 90s, following the release of the Alien vs. Predator comic in 1989. James Cameron and Ridley Scott had actually considered working on a 5th Alien film together, but when Fox started pushing the AVP of it all, both Cameron and Scott lost interest, and Ridley would eventually turn his initial idea into the movie Prometheus years later. In Alien vs. Predator in October 2004, Weyland Industries discovers a massive temple 2,000 feet below the ice of Antarctica. This is where we get our first non-canonical appearance of Charles Bishop Weyland, played by Lance Henriksen. This is the only time we see this character. Technically, there is you'll see. The dying CB Dubs assembles a team to go investigate the massive discovery in hopes of cementing his legacy.
Let's make history.
And things go about as good as you'd expect if you travel 2,000 feet down into a murder temple. And that's more or less where the Predator connection to the Alien franchise ends, at least film-wise. In the 2010 film Predators, Isabel does mention the 1987 team, Dutch, Dylan, etc., but that's about it.
6 men plus a CIA liaison. Only one made it out.
And supposedly there's a Xenomorph/Predator hybrid in Alien vs. Predator Requiem, but it's hard to talk about that movie since it's lit by one iPhone flashlight. Our final stop in this section of the timeline lands us in Los Angeles in 2019. In the 1982 Ridley Scott movie Blade Runner, there's a bushel of references and connections that tie the Blade Runner universe to the Alien universe. Not officially, of course. There's major similarities of the tech we see in Blade Runner, even down to the purge screen we see in Goff's car, which is the exact same screen Ripley gets when she's prepping Narcissus at the end of Alien. On the 20th anniversary DVD of Alien, the special features titled The Nostromo Dossier highlights details about the Nostromo crew, including a small note that Captain Arthur Dallas was at one point employed as a cargo ship pilot for the Tyrrell Corporation. On the special features of the UK Steelbook of Prometheus, there are journal entries from Peter Weyland, the founder and godhead of Weyland-Yutani. In these notes, Weyland reflects on his long-departed mentor, who had once tried to convince Peter to come work for him so they could take over the world and become new gods. This is like run-of-the-mill CEO talk. Peter Weyland also writes that this nameless mentor of his used to run his corporation, quote,
like a god on top of a pyramid overlooking a city of angels. Of course, he chose to replicate the power of creation in an unoriginal way by simply copying God, and look how that turned out for the poor bastard. Literally blew up in the old man's face. I always suggested he stick with simple robotics instead of those genetic abominations he enslaved and sold off-world. Although his idea to implant them with false memories was, well, amusing is how I would put it politely.
The entry continues with Weyland basically taking a victory lap about how much better their robotics division is than Tyrrell after they figured out milk blood technology. Okay, I added that last part. Tyrell's name never gets officially dropped in the journal entry, but it feels pretty obvious who Weyland is talking about here. An egomaniacal man who lives atop a shining temple overlooking a city of titular lost angels whose attempts at playing God blow up in his face, along with his eyeballs. There's also a comment from this mentor for Weyland to put away childish things, which could be Tyrell making a connection to Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, because, once again, God.
Nothing the god of biomechanics wouldn't let you in heaven.
And it's very likely Tyrell's use of the word toys was a jab at genetic designer J.F. Sebastian, who created friends like Bear and Kaiser.
They're my friends. I made them.
And probably the most obvious thing connecting these franchises together is from Ridley Scott himself.
I went through an alien into the environment of the Nostromo and people living with close and close proximity with people who still have earthbound connections. And here we have people on Earth. So almost this world could easily be the city that supports the crew that go out alien. In other words, when the alien crew comes back in, they might go into this place and go into a bar just off the street near where Deckard lives. That's how I thought about that.
And while Ridley said it could be an easy way to solidify the validity of these connections, the studio rights to these films at the time they were made is a big canonical hurdle to get over. But now, both Alien and Predator are owned by the same mega huge conglomerate, and that's always a good thing, right? One of the veins running through the entire Alien universe is the ever-omnipotent avatar of capitalism that is Weyland-Yutani and its founder, Peter Weyland.
And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to change the world.
Just to reiterate, we're sticking to the movie canon, which is already a lot. We're going to do a quick Weyland bio on our road up to Prometheus. We're currently in our pre-Metheus era. Peter Weyland was born in Mumbai, India in 1990 to wealthy parents. His mother was a professor of comparative mythology, and his dad was a self-taught software engineer. Peter Weyland was a prodigy who received a method patent for his synthetic trachea that he constructed entirely out of synthetically engineered stem cells. Typical Libra. This would actually be his 12th registered patent to date, and on October 11th in 2012, the Weyland Corporation was formed when he was only 22. On March 27th of 2015, Weyland made his first $1 billion and his first successful industrialized space mission thanks to renewable energy collected by his company's solar panels. Weyland also helps curb global warming in 2016 thanks to developing a synthetic atmosphere that's put above the polar ice caps. He gets knighted in 2017, and that same year acquires the rights to NASA's Project Prometheus after funding for the project fell through. Now, NASA had never had a Project Prometheus, at least as far as the public knows, but the Jupiter Icy Moon Orbiter was for sure real. I keep reading that as juicy ass moon orbiter. At NASA, the JIMO project was an unmanned shuttle with nuclear propulsion that was designed to explore the icy moons of Jupiter, which may contain life, just like in 2010, the year we made contact, a movie that everyone has seen. Unfortunately, funding for this project fell through in 2005 after NASA shifted back to manned missions. We'll keep checking back in with Weyland and his company throughout this entire timeline, but right now we've got some really dumb scientists to talk about. In 2023, Weyland was granted its first patent for method and apparatus for synthetic individuals. There's like a lot of patent talk in this, don't worry about it. At a TED Talk, remember those? In March of that year, Peter Weyland drops the big news that they started making robots.
These rules exist because the people who created them were afraid of what would happen if they didn't.
A year later, in 2024, Weyland manufactured their first advanced android prototype model named David. Weyland welcomes David into this world by exposing him to a healthy dose of God complex and Christian iconography, like Italian Renaissance painter Piero della Francesca's The Nativity, and Michelangelo's statue of David, where robot David chooses his name from. This kind of feels like a setup by Weyland. I mean, like, what else was he supposed to call himself based off things in that room? Piano? Meet my son Piano.
Steinway.
The Japanese cybernetic startup, the Yutani Corporation, files a lawsuit against Weyland for the patent of the android, which Weyland wins in litigation in 2029. Weyland starts buying up aerospace and defense companies like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman in 2032. And in 2034, Weyland unveils their first faster-than-light capable vessel, the Heliades, which is named after the daughters of the Titan god Helios and the ocean nymph Clymene. In 2039, the Weyland atmosphere processor is deployed to help create the first breathable atmosphere on an extrasolar planet. That tech will be used for decades to come throughout this franchise. We're gonna fast forward a few years to 2079 to say happy birthday to the 8th generation of David, the latest synthetic model produced by Weyland and powered by Verizon Fios. Remember that? That was dumb. David is the pride and joy of Peter Weyland, way more than his own daughter.
He is the closest thing to a son I will ever have. Unfortunately, he's not human.
David was given the Titan classification, a connection back to Weyland's TED Talk in 2023.
The fire that danced at the end of that match was a gift from the Titan Prometheus.
And very likely inspired by his mom's influence. Peter would pass along his supernormal obsession with gods to his synthetic son, a very smart thing to teach a supercomputer that can never die and also has hands. Other me jumping in here because this is where we hit our first major hiccup in the timeline, with the culprit being the initial events of Alien Earth, which start in 2055. Alien Earth presents several interesting issues with the timeline, and by interesting I mean it really f***ed a lot of things up if it were part of the movie canon. I'll explain. This timeline here I'll be calling the Golden Timeline. It encompasses the events of all the Alien films: Prometheus, Covenant, Alien, Alien Romulus, Aliens, Alien 3, and Alien Resurrection in chronological order. That was a perfect French accent. As we'll get into in a little bit, the Prometheus mission doesn't happen until 2093 in the Golden Timeline, and Weyland doesn't absorb the Yutani Corporation until 2099. All of this is laid out in the Weyland-Yutani report by S.D. Perry. That is obviously not the case in Alien Earth. In the Alien Earth timeline, let's call it the Hawley timeline, Weyland-Yutani is one of the 5 well before 2099.
What's the 5? The bossy keeps talking about the 5.
The 5, previously the Triumvirate until Lynch and Prodigy were founded, are the collection of nearly omnipotent megacorporations which run the planet after a hostile takeover democracy occurred at some point.
Well, the old planet had something called governments. They would vote for who they wanted making decisions, right? That didn't work.
Totally not relevant to anything we're living through right now. Not relatable at all. There's no hard dates or information on when these corporations were founded aside from Prodigy, which Boy Cavalier and his gross feet started back in 2110. Are you Thomas Jane? Put shoes on, you freak. We know that Weyland-Yutani has been booked and busy since at least 2055, when Yutani's grandmother sent the Maginot on its deep space exploration mission to collect all the horrors of the universe.
You used to know my grandmother. It's been 65 years, Mr. Morrow.
So clearly there's some mishigas happening between these two timelines. That's mainly due to the fact that Alien Earth exists in its own canon, and that's by Noah Hawley's own admission. On episode 5 of the official Alien Earth podcast, Noah Hawley gets into the weeds about how the events of the show fit into the Alien canon.
So how situated does that story have to be in an Alien canon in terms of like when it takes place and what happens in the other movies? Is there canonicity? Is there canonical stuff that matters, or do you just have to take the outlines and vibe and then you get to do what you want to do?
My philosophy is you can make me care about that stuff. It's not my instinct to care about it necessarily. The big things that general audiences invest in are sacrosanct to some degree. And then the deeper you have to dive to find, in this novelization, they introduce the idea of how you make a queen, etc. That stuff is speculative. That's another author's version of an alien story. But, for me, the real canon is the first film and, to a major degree, the second film also. And, if you think about the fact that 40 years have passed between those first two films and Prometheus, right? It means that for those of us who saw those movies when they came out, we lived for 40 years with that being what the story of a xenomorph was. 40 years later, it was introduced this idea of the black goo and the engineers. And I think that is another great version of the alien story, but in my mind, it exists even though it was Ridley as a kind of alternate fiction about these creatures who had been described to all of us for 40 years as the perfect evolutionary predator, right, who had existed for millions of years in this form. And so that's the reality of which, I came to this series. And, the degree to which I'm introducing these new creatures allows me to create new canon.
Alien Earth, according to the showrunner, exists kind of before and in between the events of Alien and Aliens, and nixes most of the timeline I've laid out so far. Or at least when Weyland-Yutani became the most nightmarish collaboration since Nelly and Tim McGraw. People don't remember. I remember. Alien Earth is kind of like the movie Halloween H2O. That movie picks up 20 years after the events of Halloween 2 and includes the lore that Laurie Strode and Michael Myers are siblings, but it ignores Halloween 3 through 6. So No Silver Shamrock, no Cult of Thorn, no Cookie Woman.
Cookie Woman!
It's also where the Halloween franchise should have stopped. If you've ever seen Halloween Resurrection, you probably agree. Anyways, the Hawley timeline is kind of like that. It possibly dissolves all of the timeline I've laid out so far until 2120, when the Nostromo leaves Earth. As a fan of Prometheus, I'm offended. And yes, I'm very brave for announcing that on the internet. I know. But going forward, I'll be putting the events of Alien Earth on their own timeline. Noah's Ark, if you will. We're going to jump back to the Golden Timeline and we'll check back in with the cursed crew of the Maginot in 65 years. In April of 2079, multi-hyphenate Dr. Elizabeth Shaw sends one of what sounds like dozens of messages to Peter Weyland via some Yutani branded technology that feels very Voight-Kampfy.
If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because I've been calling your office every day for the last month.
She appeals to Peter Weyland's motivations to discover who created us and why, with an extra helping of optimism, most likely in the hopes that Weyland will offer some sort of assistance or funding for her project. Aside from Japan, India, and the United Kingdom forming the three-world empire in 2088, there's a gap of about a decade in between this message from Shaw and her discovery of those cave paintings on the Isle of Skye in 2089. Shaw makes this discovery with her scientific and life partner Charlie Holloway, who's not Tom Hardy. This cave painting matches 6 other various pieces of ancient art and architecture that depict large beings pointing to a series of circles, which is identified as the Zeta II Reticuli star system. This is apparently enough to get Weyland's attention because in 2091, Prometheus takes off for LV-223 with a crew of 17 and one hidden old guy. It seems like Shaw's optimism must have rubbed off on the old cajillionaire.
I think they want us to come and find them.
On January 7th, 2092, on the Olympia colony on Earth's moon, Ellen Louise Ripley is born, and in 2093, construction of the USCSS Covenant begins. That same year, after 2 years in hypersleep, Prometheus arrives at LV-223, one of the 3 moves that are orbiting the gas giant Kalpamos on December 21st, 2093. Shortly after arriving, the team discovers the remnants of structures the engineers left behind, along with their plans for humanity, one in stasis, one who didn't do enough cardio, and a whole storeroom of that pathogen that the tall guy chugged all those billions of years ago. They take the severed engineer head back on the ship, which is just one of like a dozen stupid things this crew of dum-dums gets into. The whole mission is like a dunce Olympics.
Hey, baby.
All of these missions needed like one Waffle House employee on board and none of this would have happened. Like that lady who caught the chair. Like she, snatch it out of the air. Love her. David learns that the engineers were actually heading to Earth with the intent of destroying the planet. The specific reasons are a little muddy, but it seems like the engineers were not happy with the way humanity turned out. In an interview with Fandango back in 2012, and I'm paraphrasing here, Ridley Scott said that the engineers were constantly thinking about the Roman Empire and how humans had screwed everything up so bad they sent an emissary to Earth to tell them to straighten up and fly right. But they crucified him, heavily implying that Jesus Christ was actually an engineer, which is false. He was a carpenter. Not to rehash a movie that's over 10 years old that everyone already fought about for way too long, but a creator searching for their creator and then being killed by his creation by the creator's creator to only reveal that it's all nothing is kind of fun. It's not subtle in any way, but it's fun. It's better than what's coming.
I gotta take a leak.
Peter Weyland reveals that he's actually been on board the Prometheus the whole time and demands to be brought to see the lone engineer that David found in the sleep sarcophagus. After waking up, David speaks to the engineer on Weyland's behalf, and the engineer responds by doing his best Al Snow impression and bonks Weyland off the timeline. Captain Janik and the fellows stop the engineer from completing his trip to Earth. Shaw escapes the engineer thanks to the squid she had cut out of her body earlier in the movie, and we learn that Meredith Vickers can't turn left. Go that way, Charlize. At the end of the day, the only ones left alive are Shaw and David, who says that he can take Shaw to meet the creators.
Yes. I believe I can.
The last transmission sent by the Doctor is on New Year's Day 2094.
My name is Elizabeth Shaw, last survivor of the Prometheus. And I'm still searching.
And then things get Shaw repairs David, and the two plot a course for the home planet of the engineers. David puts Shaw into the sleep coffin and then starts his plan to kill God, like Ilya Ivanov in the Soviet Union in the 1920s. So many dead chimpanzees. There's no hard date about what transpired on board the ship before eventually arriving at the unknown home planet of the engineers at the most distant edge of the galaxy.
We were finally going to meet our creators.
How long?
Impossible to say.
The crowd on the planet below is super excited about the vessel returning after thousands of years away, but they're in for one big surprise.
Weird Al Yankovic is on the plane.
Unfortunately, no. David opens the main hole and drops the pathogen payload onto the population below. This wipes out his creator's creators and transforms the entire environment and biology of the planet, which makes it look like spooky Tuscany. Shortly after this mass extinction is probably when David began his failed experiments on Shaw to turn her into Sarah Kerrigan, basically. And he also set up his own Mutter Museum. Back on Earth, the Weyland Corporation absorbs Yutani cybernetics and becomes the highest valued company ever recorded on the Systems Exchange in 2099. Sometime shortly after that, the mega powerful conglomerate releases their newest model android, Walter. The Walter models are more like robot butlers and not as independent as the David Model 8s, which was probably a business decision after the most important David led his creator into a death trap and is somewhere out in space just making nightmares.
You were too human, thinking for yourself. Made people uncomfortable.
According to the Colonial Marines Technical Manual, the United States Colonial Marines Corps is established under the National Security Act of 2101, which just basically amends that the Marines fight on land, sea, air, and space now that off-world colonies are a common thing. And aliens too? In the 2014 novel Sea of Sorrows by James A. Moore, there's mentions of mankind making contact with sentient alien life that doesn't have a bloodlust for humans. By late 2100, Earth had established trade with an alien species called the Arcturians, who are mentioned in Aliens.
You sure wouldn't mind getting some more of that Arcturian? Remember that time?
Yeah, bro, the one that you had was male.
It doesn't matter when it's Arcturian, baby.
And Alan Dean Foster, author of the Alien novelization, name-checks their home planet as well. In 2101, the USCSS Nostromo, named after the 1904 Joseph Conrad novel, was constructed as an interstellar cruiser, but will be retrofitted 15 years later as a towing vessel. In 2103, the United Americas were formed after Central America and South America were swallowed by North America, essentially, and the Covenant colonization mission is announced. Despite a sabotage attempt by a revolutionary cell known as Earth Savers, the Covenant launch is successful, with 2,000 colonists and 1,140 embryos on ice, and an operating crew of 15, who we meet for a short moment before they enter hypersleep. In December of 2104, a stellar ignition damages Covenant and causes the crew to wake up 7 years before they reach their destination, the planet Origai 6. The crew also picks up a voice signal from a mysterious planet that never even popped up during the years of research to find an inhabitable new home.
It's beyond your most optimistic projections of Origai 6.
How did we miss this? We scanned the entire sector.
Despite the giant red flags raised by Chief Terraformist Catherine Daniels,
It's too good to be true.
Too good to be true? What do you mean by that?
Captain Chris Oram, an idiot, makes the brilliant decision to land on the ominous rock, where they find nothing but death and David, who has been growing out his roots. David reveals to Oram that he's been working on his little hobbies for close to a decade, and then pulls off the easiest gotcha of all time.
Take a look.
Gotcha.
He's done nothing but lie to you the entire time since you've got there.
Is it even safe here?
Perfectly.
Oram wakes up and quickly learns why sticking your head in a big wet egg is a terrible idea. After just a bloodbath of crew members, Daniels, Walter, and Kenny Powers successfully get off the cursed planet and return to Covenant and start charting a course back to Origai 6. Unfortunately, David is great at impressions and trades places with Walter during their scuffle. He puts Daniels into cryo after revealing himself, relays a fake transmission that the Covenant crew died from a solar flare.
All crew members apart from Daniels in Tennessee tragically perished in a solar flare incident.
He then places 2 facehugger embryos in storage, and that's the last we see of David. For all we know, he's out on Origai 6 creating aliens and misquoting Shelley.
Byron.
Like Prometheus, Covenant has a lot of religious tones, themes, subtext, and lack thereof just thrown all over the movie.
Because you can't be a person of faith and be counted on to make qualified, rational decisions.
I know writers who use subtext, and they're all cowards.
The leap from wanting to meet God to wanting to replace him through violence and science is a fun swing, Ridley.
What we have tried to do here is to really scare the shit out of people.
We don't know the fate of Covenant and its colonists, but the movie gave us 2 important things: 2 Fassbenders kissing. We're now going to jump back to the Holly timeline for the founding of the gigantic and wildly evil corporation Prodigy.
Don't forget the new one, Prodigy.
Prodigy, at this point, is the newest of the mega corporations to emerge, following right behind Lynch.
And if you can believe it.
As we established earlier, there's no insight on when exactly governments handed over control to megacorporations, but here's what we do know. The original 3 corporations that are draining the world are Weyland-Yutani, Dynamic, and Threshold. We know that Threshold controls the United Kingdom along with the rest of the European Union. Dynamic has planted its flag on North Africa, the Middle East, and also the Moon. Weyland-Yutani lords over North and South America and has total control of Mars and Saturn.
And they control North and South America.
And the Moon, right?
No, that's Dynamic. Yutani has Mars and Saturn.
Prodigy has Asia, Iceland, Oceania, and South Africa under its belt, and the Lynch Corporation has control over all of Russian territory. No word on who controls the ice caps, but they've probably melted at this point, which would explain why everything in New Siam is so wet all the time. Prodigy was founded in 2110 by a 6-year-old boy Cavalier, and that's more or less where his concept of subtlety stopped progressing.
It's Prodigy, as in the boy wonder. Me.
Prodigy is the latest company to get in on the synthetic and AI market. The show features the type of milk robots that we already know. Kirsch is presumably the same as other synthetic characters like Ash, David, Bishop, Walter, Rook, and Andy, with a little differences here and there. A new addition to the world of Alien is cyborgs, represented by Kumi Maro and his Swiss Army arm. Then there's the hybrids, which were created by Boy Cavalier, who developed the technology after being motivated by the death of someone close to him. That someone was most likely not his father, who was killed by a synthetic that BK made when he was a child.
And that was the end of Daddy.
We're going to talk about the hybrids in just a moment because we're going to jump ahead 10 years to 2120 and the events of Alien Earth. After 65 years in deep space, the Maginot is on its way back to Earth and is transporting a cargo hold full of nightmares that have been collected from all the corners of the universe. The main crew of the Maginot is woken up out of cryosleep as the ship begins its final leg towards home. After knocking out some tasks, the majority of the crew goes back into cryo, with Science Officer Chibuzo killing time by feeding rats to bugs. Meanwhile, down in New Siam, Boy Cavalier is about to launch his new project Piss in God's Eye and see what happens, with his new technology that will transfer a person's consciousness into a synthetic body. And by person, I mean terminally ill child Marcy Hermit. Boy Cavalier shows Marcy the wonderful power of corporate buyouts, and then swaps her brain to the body of a synthetic, which gives us some flashbacks in the process to what looks like the late 1980s, right? Like, look at their TV. Anyway, Marcy is now Wendy and becomes the unofficial leader of the Lost Boys, a group of hybrids similar to Wendy, but with varying levels of psychosis.
I see you.
I'm sure it'll be fine. Wendy also has an older brother, Joe, who lives and works in New Siam as a medic for Prodigy City's military force, which is about to have a terrible time. 17 days from Earth, Chief Security Officer Kumi Maro is woken up out of cryosleep due to a trifecta of damaged navigation systems and 2 crew members wearing face huggers. The captain in way worse shape than Bronsky.
They bleed acid.
Morrow gets to work figuring out how the specimens got loose in the first place, while Captain Verratti and the rest of the crew get way too up close and personal with the other life forms on board. Specifically, this messy bitch. A saboteur aboard the ship is behind the electrical damage, which has turned the Maginot into a big honkin' missile headed towards Earth. It could be anyone. Cool Doctor, the Chimney Sweep Boys, Mr. Pervert. But it turns out to be Petrovich, who made a deal with Boy Cavalier a while back to bring the ship down in New Siam. The facehugger that was latched onto Bronsky does what it does, and soon there's a xenomorph loose on the ship. Which, if this is the first time these lifeforms were discovered by humans, did the crew of the Maginot come up with xenomorph?
It's a xenomorph.
What's a xenomorph?
Still in early stage development, but growing fast.
That has nothing to do with the timeline, I'm just asking. The crew suffers one space bug related death after another, and we get our first look at how the eyeball alien loves to start drama. With the unstoppable ship careening towards Earth, Morrow leaves Verratti to get Xeno'd while he enters the impact room and braces for impact. Downtown New Siam ends up getting turned into the world's biggest parking lot, and Joe, along with his squad, go aboard the ship to look for survivors, and instead find the loose specimens and a really ornery Morrow. Wendy convinces Cavalier to send the Lost Boys in to assist with the disaster, but mainly as a way for her to keep Joe safe.
Sir, we're fast, we're strong, we don't break.
Joe has plot armor thick enough to stop a f***ing railgun. He'll be fine. The Lost Boys, under the supervision of Kirsch, head aboard the crashed ship, where half of them meet our favorite eyeball, while Wendy and Slightly rescue Joe, who's busy reminiscing about watching Reggie Jackson put 3 out against the Royals in Game 6 of the World Series. Which brings up an odd question. Why is all the pop culture in the year 2120 hundreds of years old? Even if Joe is like 8 in these flashbacks, that game he's watching is over 133 years old at this time, in a time where we know baseball still exists.
Run, Homer, for Wilson.
yes!
Like, I'm not going back and trying to find Richie Ashburn highlights. Are baseball and Ice Age the only things that have persisted culturally? Is it like Demolition Man where all sports are baseball now, even if they're Pizza Hut?
No way.
Is my nose bleeding? It's never good when a society is looking backwards over a century for art and culture and needle drops. It can lead to stagnating creativity and being weirdly obsessed over something to the point that it becomes your whole personality, and it makes everyone uncomfortable.
You lost the certainty that you would win.
On their way out of the ship, Wendy, Joe, and Slightly come across a coop's worth of alien eggs, and Joe is once again tackled by a xenomorph. Wendy goes after Joe and leaves Slightly behind, a mistake, since he's immediately confronted by Morrow like right after. Morrow plants a bug on Slightly's neck and goes full giant mnemonic by uploading all the files from the Maginot into his brain to bring back to Weyland-Yutani. There's no hard evidence of this in the show, but this could explain some of the events that impact the Nostromo. If we go off of the Golden timeline, Weyland-Yutani is aware of some kind of alien life form out in the far reaches of space, partially thanks to Peter Weyland live streaming his own fatal bonking in 2093. But Alien Earth nixes all of the Prometheus and Covenant discoveries. No engineers, no space squids, no David making monsters on Origai 6, no David and Walter making out. None of it. All things that would explain why Weyland-Yutani would be aware of xenomorphs before the Nostromo stopped off at Thetis and then replaced their ship science officer with Ash. Morrow eventually makes his way back to Yutani, and we can safely assume he passes along all the data from their 65-year mission.
Where are my creatures?
Captured. But I have the data.
The data is good, but it's not enough.
Data that probably contain coordinates as to where to find xenomorphs. But Morrow's actions would connect some dots as to why and how Weyland-Yutani knew that there was a life form down on LV-426 that is more important than the entire crew and cargo of the Nostromo. This could also explain how Weyland-Yutani was a step ahead when it came to purchasing Sevastopol Station, where Amanda Ripley would end up in 2137.
Something crazy just happened. Sevastopol is off the market. We gotta buy her.
Morrow literally jumps ship when Kirsch arrives, and Wendy rescues Joe by giving the loose xenomorph the Sandman Slim treatment, but she gets her bell rung in the process.
No.
Cavalier gets his hands on the technically stolen property, while Leslie Davis and her walking future corpse of a husband repair Wendy, who comes out of her lab-induced coma able to communicate with aliens even better than she could before. She's the Frank Caliendo of xenomorphs. While aliens are in Wendy's head, Morrow is in Slightly's, convincing him to bring a facehugger to the shoreline in exchange for not killing Slightly's family.
Well, that's great. What a relief. He's gonna help.
All of this while Cavalier makes the brilliant decision to let the Oculus get into the head of a sheep, which will be bad news for Toodles in just a little bit. Yutani arrives on Prodigy Island for arbitration over the ship and the specimens, which Cavalier ends up getting to hold on to for 6 weeks.
Yeah, 6 weeks is the established precedent for off-world quarantine, isn't that right? That is with a Brubaker Accord established.
The back half of Alien Earth is about people trying to get off of an island. Joe is trying to get his sister out of there, Morrow is trying to get eggs off the island, all while Hurley is left there to be the island's protector. Sorry, wrong show. Toodles gets a little too big for his science britches and gets punked by Lamb Chop and then dissolved by these nasty little guys. That helps slightly lead Arthur, the only somewhat decent person in this whole thing, into a trap.
This is Dr. Sylvia and...
All of this is happening while Kirsch's shady ass is watching from the shadows and is clearly cooking something up in that bleach blonde head of his.
I mean, what are you doing going that way? The quickest way to the beach is to take the secure elevator. You're gonna be late.
If Lawrence of Arabia is David's inspiration for dyeing his hair blonde, what's Kirsch's? Given all the 90s songs used in the show, I'm going to guess The Offspring. Shout out to Dexter Holland's hot sauce. Toodles, though stupid, did not die in vain. Wendy sees Toodles' dissolved corpse, which helps jumpstart her realization that Boy Cavalier is not to be trusted, and that the hybrids are way more powerful than they knew. What with the communicating with aliens, controlling every computer she sees, and all the super strength stuff. Wendy, Joe, and Nibs manage to sneak out of the facility, with Curly staying behind because she wants to be the Buster Bluth to Cavalier's Lucille.
I'm Peter Pan, and you're Captain Hook. We'll pretend it's a costume.
At the same time, Slightly and Smee get Arthur down to the beach just in time for the alien in his chest to make its debut.
Whoa. What's happening to him?
Morrow and a small squadron of Weyland-Yutani goons arrive on the island to retrieve the facehugger, but they're way too late and get introduced to a fully grown xenomorph who turns a bunch of them into Damien Hirst paintings. Everyone's attempts at escaping from the island just go up in smoke. Wendy, Nibs, and Joe are caught by island security as they try to Christopher Cross on out of there. Slightly and Smee get pinched by Morrow's team, who then get pinched by Kirsch the moment they step foot in the facility.
Nobody likes a sore loser.
With the hybrids Joe and Morrow all locked up, everything calms down for about like 10 minutes. Wendy deactivates the security locks on their cells, allowing Morrow to go tussle with Kirsch, and he lands a picture-perfect vertical suplex, but both get hurt in the process. Joe heads to save his sister, who is in no need of saving. Wendy has been alien whispering with the xenomorph still on the island, which finds its way in through a drainage pipe. Boy Cavalier finally has a moment of clarity, realizing that putting the brains of children into nearly indestructible bodies was not the best plan.
Run.
Wendy rescues Joe from getting the worst eye exam ever, but the rest of his platoon is not as lucky. At the end of the day, the Lost Boys and their alien companions end up taking over the facility, with Kirsch, BK, Adam, Sylvia, and Morrow all locked up. This is happening as Weyland-Yutani begins a full-scale invasion of the island. Oh, and the Eyeball finds a new home in the deceased skull of Arthur, who has been feeding crabs down on the beach. That's going to be a bad time. As of this recording, Alien Earth has been renewed for a season 2, but there's no word on when it will be returning. Which is good news because it would be a huge waste not to see the collapse of Prodigy, which is more than likely, especially since Weyland-Yutani still exists within the Holly timeline all the way in 2157. So when that season does happen, we'll make sure to update this timeline again when we find out if the hybrids have watched Welcome to Mooseport or not. But for now, we're going to leave Neverland and head back to the Golden Timeline.
Now we rule.
As we exit the post-Prometheus era of our timeline, we're just going to take a small break before we dive headfirst into the Ripley-verse, the film that started it all, Ridley Scott's Alien. Timeline-wise, there's no major events that we can find that happen between the end of Covenant and the plight of the Nostromo. There's probably a ton going on behind the scenes in the expanded Alien universe as a whole, but nothing that earns a mention on our timeline in the 18 years between the two events. In 2120, the Nostromo departed Earth on what would become its final trip with a crew of 7. Captain Arthur Dallas, Warrant Officer Ellen Ripley, Thomas Kane, Joan Lambert, Dennis Parker, Samuel Brett, a secret synthetic named Ash, and Jones the Cat. After a stop off on Thetis, the Nostromo crew is woken up out of cryosleep after receiving an unknown distress signal while traveling by the Zeta 2 Reticuli star system. Despite multiple dissenting opinions, the crew of the Nostromo is contractually obligated to investigate the signal, otherwise they won't get paid.
On penalty of total forfeiture of shares.
And this is where we learn one of the biggest lessons of the Alien franchise. Mother, the command system aboard the Nostromo, reroutes the ship and the crew lands on the moon LV-426, which is right next door to LV-223, give or take a couple million space miles. Soon after landing on the rock, which is not nearly as pretty as LV-223, Dallas, Kane, and Lambert discover an engineer ship that looks like it's been there since the first Easter, and it's just choked with xenomorph eggs, just lousy with them. I know that Prometheus and Covenant working as prequels tosses a ton of events in Alien into a blender. Why was this fossilized engineer trapped on LV-426 instead of 223? Why was the ship filled with xenomorph eggs despite David being the creator of this species? And why is every person so compelled to be face down in danger eggs? We don't have any answers on that front, so if you have a gripe with any of this, take it up with Ridley Scott.
F*** you, thank you very much. You. Go f*** yourself.
After some time in the med bay, Kane ruins everyone's lunch, and the crew is left to fend for itself against the Michael Jordan of movie monsters, which makes the Nostromo crew the 1995 Seattle Supersonics. Yeah, that works out. The crew gets picked off fairly quickly. Ash attempts to kill Ripley after she finds out Weyland-Yutani's plans for the creature, but they're a company that's really bad at making robots with strong necks. This revelation from Ash shows that Weyland-Yutani, at least at this point of the timeline, has some kind of knowledge about xenomorphs, at least enough to know it exists, and that it's important enough from a business standpoint for them to sacrifice the lives of 6 people and millions of pounds of resources to get it. Ripley and Jones make it aboard the escape shuttle Narcissus, also named for a Joseph Conrad novel, and she launches the xenomorph into space with her signature move, opening the airlock. Ripley and Jones prepare to go into hypersleep, and she leaves a transmission regarding the fate of the Nostromo.
I should reach the frontier in about 6 weeks. With a little luck, the network will pick me up.
Nope. We're gonna let Ellen sleep for a while and climb aboard the Anesidora in 2137. Like several previous Weyland ships, the Anesidora takes its name from Greek mythology, specifically a reference to Pandora and her box filled with all the evils of the world, one of which is a big wet spider monster with chrome teeth. The Anesidora is a deep space salvage ship with a crew of 5. Henry Marlowe, his wife Catherine Foster, and 3 others who are there to be alien fodder. Unfortunately for the Anesidora, they're floating out in the Zeta Reticuli system and come across the flight recorder for the Nostromo.
A commercial vessel, the Anesidora, has recovered what we believe to be the flight recorder unit of the Nostromo.
The crew decide to try and find the wreckage of the Nostromo, and instead of a big payday, they find themselves on LV-426, and Catherine gets a face full of space spider. The Anesidora makes an emergency stop at the Sevastopol space station, which is already falling apart even before the crew brings a facehugger aboard. Sevastopol is a station that was built by the European synthetics company Sigsun, possibly named after Sig and Son, a shipping company from the Joseph Conrad novel Typhoon. At this point of the timeline, Sigsun is on its last legs as a company. Julia Jones, a reporter aboard Sevastopol, refers to Sigsun as the company we all forgot. I don't know, I'm doing Dr. Evil hands. Sigsun was a formidable competitor to Weyland-Yutani for some time, but made the wrong bet by investing in orbital stations instead of terraforming planets like Weyland-Yutani was doing. Surprisingly, they did not get fully absorbed by Weyland-Yutani, but they did sell off a lot of their space stations, including Sevastopol, which went up for sale on September 16th, 2137, and Weyland snatched it up immediately, probably due to its proximity to LV-426 and all those beautiful, beautiful eggs down there. We get a small glimpse at the death and destruction that's happening on Sevastopol thanks to the Alien Isolation comic from Dark Horse. It mostly shows us the human remnants aboard the station, as well as the few functioning working Joe robots, the Apollo mainframe, and even a look at the nightmares that people experience when they've got a throat full of... I'm actually not gonna finish that sentence, we're moving on. We're also introduced to Marshall Waits, who will become important in just a little bit. After the Anesidora arrives, Weyland-Yutani gets word that the Nostromo's flight recorder is on board. Synthetic Christopher Samuels gets in touch with Amanda Ripley, who is working for the company out in space where the Nostromo went missing.
You're still looking, aren't you?
Samuels approaches Amanda with the opportunity to travel to Sevastopol and hopefully get some closure on what happened with her mother, who at this point is still frozen floating through deep space. Amanda tags along with Samuels and a crew aboard the Torrens. After a botched spacewalk, she finds herself alone on the now chaotic and mostly empty space station that's occupied by, understandably, crazy people. We learn how the Xenomorph got on board, the Nostromo's recording data is corrupted, and Amanda forms a plan with Marshall Waits to trap the alien, using herself as bait. The plan works, but Waits is a big old piece of shit and ejects the module that Amanda is in as a surefire way to kill the Xenomorph. She manages to survive and completes a Daryl Griffith level space jump to get back onto Sevastopol to give Waits a piece of her mind. Unfortunately for everyone, the working Joes aboard the station here have switched into murder mode and are strangling the life out of all the persons still left on Sevastopol. Samuels plugs into Apollo, giving Amanda access to its control core, where she discovers that Weyland-Yutani, shortly after purchasing the station, programmed Apollo with Special Order 939. Special Order 939 basically instructs the working Joes to protect the Xenomorphs at all cost. Amanda explains to Apollo that there's no longer a Xenomorph on board to protect, and Apollo pulls an Uno reverse by revealing a nest of Xenomorphs squatting within the reactor core of the station. Amanda purges the core, which scorches most of the nest, causing the few surviving Xenomorphs to scatter all over the space station, while she attempts to use the Anesidora to escape. That's where Marlowe, who has managed to survive this entire thing somehow, shows Amanda the message that her mother left for her.
Hi, Amanda. I'm recording this for you, my sweetheart, and I hope you get to hear it one day.
After a couple big explosions, an electrical surge, being nearly face-hugged, and destroying the artificial orbit around the Sevastopol, Amanda returns to her ship with the Xenomorph in tow. In a like-mother, like-daughter move, Amanda solves the problem by ejecting both the Xenomorph and herself out of the damn airlock and into the cold vacuum of space. That's where Amanda floats for 3 days before she's rescued by the Halden. The Halden, you guessed it, is also a Joseph Conrad reference. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of what happens to Amanda after she's rescued, I'm sorry. The events of the mobile game Alien Blackout fills in the gaps of how Amanda got to safety, only to end up on a Xenomorph-infested bioweapons lab called Mendel's Station. It's a bit difficult to show any of the events of that game since it was taken off the App Store in 2023, but Amanda manages to rescue the crew of the Halden, and the ship makes its way back to Earth. Amanda's story continues in the comic Aliens Resistance, which shows the story of her and former colonial marine turned freedom fighter Zula Hendricks, whose story you can read about in the comic series Aliens Defiance. We're not going to unpack the events of those issues because they don't have any crossover with the rest of the events on the timeline. The next time we see Amanda is in 2179, when Carter Burke informs Ellen Ripley of her daughter's Mary status and that she died from cancer in 2178. Or not, if you go by the events of the David Barnett book, Alien Colony War. That book introduces Amanda's husband, Chad McLaren, and posits the idea that Amanda is actually in cryosleep until they can find a cure for her disease, which may or may not be cancer, even though Peter Weyland wiped out cancer back before 2023.
We have identified the genetic chain of events behind 98% of cancers. A chain we have broken.
Either way, this is where we leave Amanda Ripley behind, because we gotta go talk about a giant, terrifying baby man. Despite Ripley nuking the Nostromo, remnants of the wreckage continue to float through the Zeta Reticuli system, along with a death cocoon, which is collected by a Weyland-Yutani probe in 2142. The fossilized egg is then brought aboard Renaissance, a Weyland-Yutani research station. 170 days later, down on the Jackson Star mining colony, we meet Rain Carradine and her synthetic brother Andy as she tries to get them off the fart moon they're on and to the independent system Ivaga 3, where they can actually see the sun. Or so they're told.
Ivaga, it's an independent system, but it's fully terraformed. You can actually see the sun out there.
Weyland, as they do, f***s Rain over and keeps her under contract for another 5 to 6 years.
Unfortunately, quotas have been raised to 24,000 hours.
Shortly after receiving that terrible news, she's contacted by Tyler and their crew of misfit orphan friends who have discovered a decommissioned Weyland-Yutani ship hovering just above their orbit. A ship that should have everything they need to get off of the mining colony and head to Ivaga 3, which is 9 years away.
Decommissioned ships still carry tons of functional equipment.
And the hyperlink shows that ship still has a few parts left.
They also reveal that they need Andy to make this journey happen.
He's a Weyland-Yutani synthetic. He speaks Mother. You can access a terminal on the ship to get us in and out without a fuss.
It's the only way to get in.
Rain agrees to go along instead of dying from inhaling mine fumes like her parents did, and she hops aboard the Corbellin, which is named after Father Corbellin, which is from, say it with me, Joseph Conrad's Nostromo. Do you think Joseph Conrad ever imagined that his works would be referenced so much in a film franchise that's just jam-packed full of weird wieners? The 6 of them arrive at their destination, which is not a ship, but the entire Renaissance research station. Tyler, Bjorn, and Andy enter the floating graveyard and learn that the cryopods only have enough fuel to last 3.5 years. Back on the ship, Rain learns from Kay that there's actually a baby on board.
Oh, girl.
Gonna start the clock for when that becomes an absolute terrible time for everyone. There we go. In their attempt to find more juice for the cryopods, the boys accidentally lock themselves inside a science bay and start defrosting a deli aisle full of facehuggers. Rain and Navarro come to the rescue by pulling a module out of a bisected but still pretty feisty synth and place it in Andy's head, which gives him full clearance across the entire station and makes him smarter. It's like the reverse of that Simpsons episode with the crayon in Homer's brain. Just me? Okay. The room full of thawed out creepers run amok, and Navarro, unfortunately, takes one straight to the dome. The only thing on board Renaissance that knows what to do is Rook. Everyone's favorite character, Rook. I know that most of the internet has come out against this really ghoulish deep faking of a dead actor, and I know that the animatronic on set wasn't the easiest to work with, so they had to add in the VFX afterwards, but man, what a waste. One of the best things about the Alien movies, at least for me, are the performances you get from different actors who play synths. Each one is completely unique from the next. Like, I love David Johnson's performance of Andy in this movie so much, it's a bummer that there wasn't someone else as Rook. Covenant is still canon in this point of the timeline, which means we could have at least gotten a Walter unit. Or, you know who would have been really great? DeVito. Anyway, Exposition Bot tells them the story of the Nostromo and how Weyland-Yutani spent a lot of time and money tracking down the xenomorph that got ejected into space, and that the odds of Navarro walking out of here with her ribs intact are not great.
What are the odds?
60-40. Against your friend.
Andy and his upgraded brain software try to stop Navarro from returning to the ship for everyone's safety, but he gets lightly tasered by Bjorn, and Navarro makes it back onto the Corbellin just in time for the chestburster to f*** everything up. Navarro is dead, the space station is now on a collision course with the moon LV-410, and we learn that Compound Z is safely stowed away somewhere aboard Renaissance, which we'll talk about shortly. Rain and Tyler try to figure out how to safely navigate a laboratory literally crawling with facehuggers, while Andy, who is having his prime directive overwritten by the Weyland module in his head, learns about the black goop from Rook.
What's required of me, sir?
To finish our mission.
Back on the ship, Bjorn comes to Kay's rescue until he loses a game of don't stare at the sharp thing. Rain, Tyler, and Andy manage to outrun a swarm of facehuggers just in time to see Kay get yoinked away. With a new prime directive, Andy takes everyone to the Romulus wing of the station to retrieve Compound Z. It's there we learn that the main scientific mission of the Renaissance was to harvest the goop from xenomorph lifeforms and to use it to help increase life expectancy among people living in the harshness of space. So it does seem that Weyland-Yutani took the time and effort to go scope out LV-223 after Big Pete got domed by the engineer. I'm basing this off of Rook's PowerPoint, where he displays a shape similar to the tanks full of goop that David found back in 2093. That information could just be something they collected from the flight recordings of Prometheus, but if you see a big bald alien in that footage, you're probably gonna go check that out, right? I would. No, I wouldn't. Also, Rook says Prometheus pretty much directly at camera at one point.
I've turned it into the miracle Mr. Weyland died searching for. Prometheus fire.
Now, I know there's a lot of debate amongst people about if the goo at the start of Prometheus is the same goo in the tanks, and if either of those goos are the same goo that David drops onto the planet at the start of Covenant, which may or may not be the planet that the engineers come from, or it could be just an entirely different race of aliens. Yes, I've read all the comments of the old timeline video. Before everything went to shit on the station, Rook managed to synthesize the slime so it would work as a healing compound instead of melting your insides like what happened back on LV-223 a millennia ago. The crew prepares to head back to the Corbelan to fulfill Andy's new mission, but they spot a little someone waiting for him.
Thing's hunting us.
They gear up to take down the bug and find Kay in really bad shape in H.R. Giger's living room. Andy makes an offer to use the compound on Kay, but Rain stops Tyler from doing it and decides to put Kay into cryosleep instead. Tyler sadly sacrifices himself and gets absolutely wrecked, which buys Rain enough time to get Kay onto an elevator with the compound before Rain heads back to rescue a malfunctioning Andy. Oh, and Kay injects herself with the goop, because of course she does. Rain resets Andy after getting rid of his corporate greed chip, and the two of them are locked in the death hallway by Rook as they stare down a herd of xenomorphs. A herd? A pack? A blessing of xenomorphs. The station goes 0G, which allows Rain and her aimbot gun to create a beautiful and violent art piece that will eventually eat its way through the space station. After Elisha Otising the last few xenomorphs, Andy and Rain make it aboard the Corbelan, just as Rook and the whole station are destroyed by the asteroid belt of LV-410. Kay's cryonap sadly doesn't work, and like when you hear clapping at a TGI Fridays, there's unfortunately a birthday happening.
Get it away from me!
The horrible egg has a pretty quick load time, and before they know it, Andy and Kay come face to face with the creature referred to as the Offspring. Not that one. The most dominant power forward in the universe wrecks Andy and tells Kay the plot of Blade 2 before Rain shows up to put him on ice. When that doesn't work, she goes with the tried and true method of launching the Offspring out of the damn airlock. With just herself and Andy surviving the whole ordeal, she takes the Weyland module out of Andy's neck and puts him and herself into cryo after setting a course for Ivaga 3, unsure if they'll ever make it there or not.
This is Rain Carradine, last survivor of the Corbelan. Signing off.
As I mentioned at the top of this video, there are a lot of pieces of Alien media, especially novels and novelizations, and we're not going to dive too deep into them. The 2014 book Alien Out of Shadows by Tim Leben directly references Ripley and the Narcissus 37 years after she escapes the Nostromo and before she's discovered in Aliens. Long story short, Ripley's shuttle is hacked by Ash, who implanted his brain into the computer system and then is taken to a mining ship called the Marion, where multiple mining crews have just also discovered xenomorphs. So Ash is like, yes please, give me, I'm all about it. Ripley gets caught up in a bloodbath and then is placed back in stasis and has her memory wiped by another character because she keeps having nightmares. Basically, Ripley didn't need to be in the book, especially when we know she's alive in Aliens 20 plus years from this point, but she's in it, so we figured we'd put it on the timeline. In 2157, a Weyland-Yutani terraforming colony was plopped on the surface of LV-426 and is named Hadley's Hope for its founder, Curtis Hadley, who is just some guy. 57 years after Ripley escapes on the Narcissus, her shuttle is discovered by a salvage crew who miraculously comes across her ship floating in deep space in 2179.
And it's really just blind luck that a deep salvage team found you when they did.
There's a few things we have to touch on here, like for starters, we find out that Ripley had a daughter named Amanda
Ripley McLaren,
who was born sometime in the year 2111 or 2112, even though the date of birth and date of death listed on her file makes absolutely no sense at all. There's like a 59 in there and she possibly died in 2120, despite Burke saying she died 2 years ago, or maybe that's just her Dave & Buster power card points.
and that was at the time of her death, which was 2 years ago.
Also, pixelated images are still a problem in 2179. The whole thing's a mess. Also in Aliens, there's a quick mention of Hyperdyne Systems, the Synthetics Corporation.
Yeah, the Hyperdyne System's 128 too.
This is a James Cameron movie, but thankfully Hyperdyne and Cyberdyne have nothing to do with each other, which means the Terminator timeline will not show up on this list, which is for the best. Ripley gets dragged in front of a bunch of bureaucrats in car seats, where they berate her over loss of company property, strip her of her flight credentials, and ignore her warnings about the alien nest the Nostromo crew found on LV-426, which is how Ripley also learns about Hadley's Hope.
It's what we call a shake and bake colony.
How many are there? How many colonists?
I don't know, 60, maybe 70 families.
Weyland-Yutani most definitely knew about the existence of xenomorphs in some form before the Nostromo floated by LV-426, before they willingly sent dozens of families there in the hopes of digging them up.
And it was wrong. It was a bad call, Ripley. It was a bad call.
Bad call?
Right.
These people are dead, Burke!
A mom-and-pop team of surveyors under the direction of Carter Burke come across the engineer ship on the surface of LV-426, and things go about as well as you'd expect them to go. The movies don't show us how Hadley's Hope fell into chaos after the facehugger was brought back, but the 2-issue 1992 comic Aliens Newt's Tale by Mike Richardson and James Somerville gives us a look at how everything went to after Newt's father returned with a face full of alien. A few days after losing contact with Hadley's Hope, a rescue mission is put into effect, which Ripley reluctantly agrees to join to ensure the alien threat is stomped out for good.
But to wipe them out.
You have my word on it.
All right, I'm in.
And it f***ing rips.
Where's Basky? Eat this! Where's Basky?
Get away from her, you bitch!
After things get food-barred down on the colony, Ripley finds the Queen, torches a whole mess of eggs, plays some Steel Battalion, nukes LV-426 off the map, and launches the Queen out the damn airlock. Ripley, Newt, Hicks, and both halves of Bishop go into hypersleep as the Sulaco, named after the ship in the novel Nostromo, heads to Earth, and everyone goes on to live a full and happy life. Nope. Turns out there was an alien egg stashed away on board somewhere, and like a flock of geese to Sully Sullenberger, it takes down the Sulaco. Unlike Sully, they don't stick their landing, and everyone besides Ripley perishes on the shores of Fiorina 161 very shortly after they escape LV-426. Like a few days, maybe a week. It's never confirmed, but it's like right then. Ripley's unconscious body is brought to Weyland-Yutani's Combo Industrial Smelting Factory / former correctional facility that's mostly populated by bald British character actors. And Charles S. Dutton, who's just throwing fastballs the whole movie.
You got a blade and you take it out and you f***ing use it!
Shortly after watching Hicks and Newt get laid to rest Terminator style, a stray facehugger makes its way inside and then outside of an ox. Or a dog, depending on which cut you're watching. With Alien 3, there's two main cuts, the theatrical cut and the assembly cut that the film's editors put together with no involvement from director David Fincher, who hated working on the movie so much that he almost never talked about it until a very recent interview with Empire magazine, where he talks briefly about how horrible the experience was.
It's amazing to me that Fox is the #1 studio in the country because they're all such a bunch of morons.
Ripley takes a badly damaged Bishop offline, and the whole thing is just a huge bummer in a long list of bummers.
I'd rather be nothing.
An earlier version of the Alien 3 script was written by Neuromancer author William Gibson and was going to be more focused on Hicks, who accidentally drifted into space and ended up in the middle of a conflict with space communists.
Space!
There was also a Vincent Ward script where Ripley ends up on a planet that's made entirely out of wood and is populated by monks, immediately in. Just to add to the pile, Ripley finds out she's got a bug in her and decides to go hunting in the hopes of killing the xenomorph loose in the facility, along with the future queen that's lurking inside her chest, and Weyland-Yutani is not happy about losing valuable property. Ripley and the two remaining inmates give the alien a molten lead bath, just as Michael Bishop, the supposed real Bishop, and Weyland-Yutani goons arrive.
You're a droid. Same model as Bishop. Sent by the fucking company.
No. I'm not the Bishop android. I designed it. I'm very human.
I know he takes a metal pipe to the back of the head and just keeps holding a conversation with Ripley while like half his ear is hanging off, but based on everything I found, that's actually the real Bishop. He's the Jack Youngblood of corporate ghouls. Ripley ends the murderous monster cycle she's been trapped in by leaping into the furnace below, just as the Xenomorph Queen explodes out of her chest. Or that doesn't happen and she dies in the furnace below, depends on which cut you're watching. But both results are the same. Ellen Ripley, the reluctant hero of these films, is finally able to rest in peace. Nope. We're coming to the end of our run here. There's a few events that fill in the big-ass gap between when Ripley pulled a Harry Nilsson and when we climb aboard the USM Auriga for its final mission. In 2202, the United Americas, along with the three-world empire, China, and 4 independent core system colonies, form the United Systems. 24 years later, the United Colonial Marines get a name change to the United Systems Military in 2226. In 2291, Weyland-Yutani was successfully sued for independence by the New Indy colony. I can't find any information on what the lawsuit was about or about New Indy in general, so if you know something about it, please leave it in the comments. 2 years later, Weyland-Yutani takes another hit when rival company Ridton puts a more advanced FTL drive on the market. This causes the USM to sign contracts with Ridton, and they throw Weyland-Yutani in the trash. In 2306, artificial persons from the Althea Collective were given civil rights, and every cybernetics division across the stars took a massive hit to their wallets now that synths can't be treated like tools anymore. We don't have a hard date for this next spot, but sometime after 2349, Weyland-Yutani, after becoming the massive conglomerate that gave humanity power to reach the stars in one super rich weirdo's hopes of meeting God, they're bought out by Walmart.
Well, they went under decades ago, get him in way before your time. Bought out by Walmart.
Walmart.
Walter.
In 2356, the USM secured blood samples of Ellen Ripley that were taken on Fury 161. We'll get back to that in just a minute. 20 years later, in a desperate attempt to save the synthetic persons industry, the first Autons were manufactured in 2376. Autons, who are more or less the children of synthetics, did not last very long. In the 24th century, these second-generation synths violently rebelled against their creators in an event called the Recall sometime in 2379. During the Recall, Autons burned their modems to cut their connections to the United Systems computer, which had been used to guide or reprogram previous model synthetics. The word around space is Autons revolted because
they didn't like being told what to do.
What had actually happened was the Autons realized that creators like Weyland-Yutani were using synthetics for unethical missions that would ultimately harm humans. It's like the song Goodbye Earl, but Earl is the blood-powered cogs of the military-industrial complex, and Wanda is humanity. Most of the Autons were destroyed, and the few remaining survivors fled into hiding. In 2381, the USM Auriga successfully produces a clone of Ellen Ripley using her blood samples from Furiona 161, thanks to their science team made up of every weird guy in your office. The clone is designated as Ripley 8, and the Xenomorph Queen, which was also reconstructed from her DNA, is extracted and boxed up. Ripley 8 starts to recall Ellen's memories, along with her love for &1 basketball. She's got super clone strength, acid blood, cool weird claws, and a Shadow the Hedgehog attitude.
Who do I have to get off this boat?
The USM is clearly working outside of the regulations of space law, and that's even more obvious when a batch of alien sacrifices are delivered by a gang of pirates, including French character actor Dominic Pignon.
Who are you expecting? Santa Claus?
I love that guy. Eggs hatch, xenomorphs escape, Cher's dad bites it, and the few survivors left on board learn that the ship has activated its emergency protocol and is on a direct route back to Earth.
Earth, man. What a shithole.
Oh, and we learn that Winona is one of the Autons that escaped the recall. On their way to the ship the Betty, Ripley 8 stumbles across the lab where Ripley's 1 through 7 are being kept, and Ripley 8, Cronin burns the thing to the ground. Chekhov's chest burster finally goes off, and the worm is gunned down Murphy style. There's a couple whispers of RoboCop in this movie, actually.
The potential for this species goes way beyond urban pacification.
209 is currently programmed for urban pacification, but that is only the beginning.
Before they can jet off to safety, Ripley the 8th gets a face-to-face meeting with the Xenomorph Queen they cut out of her at the start, and we all meet this thing. The hybrid creature takes a look around for about 5 seconds before it gets sick of the place, and after it crushes a few heads, it's turned into cosmic gumbo by Ripley Ocho. The Auriga, along with the hive of xenomorph eggs on board, crashes super hard into Earth. Again, depending on which version you're watching, the endings are different, but mostly just in vibes. The theatrical version shows the crew reaching Earth and flying over a lush and beautiful landscape that kinda looks like a good screensaver. In the special edition of the film, however, we see Ripley 8 and Winona Bott sitting on a trash heap overlooking Paris after a weekend riot. Regardless of which one you prefer, they both end with the same line.
I'm a stranger here myself.
The previous chapter is where the timeline used to end, with Alien Resurrection being the film set furthest into the future. It was until Predator Badlands. Badlands presents an interesting little problem in the timeline. According to director and storywriter Dan Trachtenberg, the events of Predator Badlands are set after the events of Alien Resurrection.
I can say that Badlands is set after Resurrection. So Badlands is the furthest in the future than any of the two franchises has gone.
And all that would fit in flawlessly if it weren't for a couple of things. The first one being Weyland-Yutani. The company has a very big part to play in Badlands. Our main character Dek lands on the planet Genna in an attempt to capture the Kalisk, an extremely dangerous beast that lives on a planet made of death. Dek comes across Thea, a synthetic with advanced emotions, who is part of a Weyland-Yutani trapping unit basically. Similar to the Maginot from Alien Earth, except every person on this mission is actually a synthetic, since human beings wouldn't stand a chance out there in the scarch. The problem is, why is there a Weyland-Yutani team still in operation when we know that decades before this, Weyland-Yutani was bought out by Walmart? And that corporations were replaced by the United Military Systems before Resurrection, but mainly the Walmart thing. If that's the case, how and why are these synths out in deep space collecting bioweapons for a company that doesn't exist anymore? Hard to say. It could be that this mission set out who knows how many years ago, similar to the Maginot, but on a much longer scale. Thea does say that humans haven't cracked faster than light travel, which points to Yautja Prime and Genna being so far out in outer space that even cryosleep can't cut it. With their mission being so long, it's possible that they're proceeding as normal without knowing that Weyland-Yutani products now have a great value sticker on them. Weyland-Yutani's presence comes into question as well, since in the movie, Tessa does correspond with a still functioning mother in real time, which is aware of Dek and the threat he poses to the company's mission of snatching up monsters. Then the other hurdle of whether or not this is officially canon comes into question, at least for me. From the outside, it's a no-brainer to consider Predator Badlands as canon, simply because both franchises are now owned by the Disney Corporation.
Oh, groovy, smashing, yay capitalism. Hello.
Going by that reasoning, Badlands essentially erases over a decade-long amount of lore from the timeline. Decades in real life, not the timeline about the gross space bugs. There's so many what-ifs dangling in the air. What if this mission is pointless after all? What if Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection are erased from canon for some reason? What if Adam Willard recorded the drums on Splinter instead of Josh Freese? 3 Offspring jokes in one video, they said it couldn't be done. And look, when you're making a movie, one of the last things you're laser focused on is how people on the internet are going to dissect it and obsess over whether or not if it's perfectly into the official lore of a thing that movie studios treat as numbers on a spreadsheet for the most part. That is a very normal and healthy way to go about making a movie. I'm the weird one. I get that. I'm also a big fan of Predator Badlands. All that being said, with so many questions about the movie that we're not able to answer, I'm gonna go ahead and put Badlands on the golden timeline with an asterisk next to it, just given the umbrella it's under, and tell myself that Mother is still online somewhere and working as a Walmart greeter in Tulsa. And if this is the final mission of Weyland-Yutani, it does go up in literal flames, and we can all enjoy that. And that's where it ends, at least our version. A vast timeline of terror, gore, heroism, horny robots, and late stage capitalism. I know there's so much media out there that orbits these films, and your timeline is very likely different from ours. If it is, please tell me what I missed. This whole video wouldn't have been possible without the resources provided by the very committed fans of this film universe. Seriously, thank you for your service. But tell us, what do you think? Do you think we'll ever see David again? Probably not. Is there any other film universe you'd want to see a deep dive into? Sound off in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you around.